Hey guys, Chief Fruity here, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the Dark Knight's Trilogy, like how it came about and why I even made it in the first place. So to start things off, the Trilogy started out as one song, and that song was Dark Knight's Part 2, Night Sky. So that was the first song I ever made out of the Trilogy, and when I was making it, I didn't even have a picture or image of it being a trilogy. I kind of just assumed it would just be one song, kind of putting out my emotion of the night, and it did just that at that time. So this was like 4 years ago. I was 12 then. I'm 16 now, and this was before YouTube. Also, before I was putting SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube. It was before all that. So basically, no one was listening to my music at this point. So then it was kind of just about writing what I felt and what I was liking at that time, and a lot of that was about night and stuff, because I really do like night and moonlight and stuff. So I put it out there on a SoundCloud. This was the first song I ever released, was Dark Knight's Part 2, Night Sky. I put it on SoundCloud 3 years ago, and it did get kind of a positive response, even though almost no one saw it, so it was just one or two people maybe. And then because of that, I'm like, I should put more stuff on SoundCloud. So that's kind of how I started being on YouTube at all, was because SoundCloud. I was putting stuff on there. And then a couple more months passed, and then I'm kind of like, Dark Nights, this kind of is not defining me now, because my style kind of changed. I was getting a little bit better at producing music. So because of that, I took off Dark Nights. And then a couple more, a year passed, and then still I hadn't done anything to Dark Knights. It was just still Part 2, and at this point it pretty much sounded the same as it does now. It just is A, not mixed as well, B, a little bit more boring, and C, just overall not done quite as well as it is now. So it was just like that for a year, where I took it off and it was just sitting just how it was. So then after I kind of was redefining myself as Chief Fruity, I wrote the album Wreckage. And then after doing, right after Wreckage released, it was sometime in July, after I went to San Francisco City Impact, actually. During that time, I was kind of I want to revisit Dark Nights. So then I made what is now Part 3, The Journey, and at that time, I was assuming that it would just be one song still. So I got rid of Part 2, I remixed it, and just called it Dark Nights. And then I renamed it and called it Dark Nights Part 3, The Journey. So that was kind of how it became to be Dark Nights Part 3 is now. But when I was making it, I was just this is just going to be one song. So then because I remixed it, when I was continuing to produce it and filter it out, make it better, mix it better, write it better, make it more interesting, and add in more basses and stuff. While I was doing that, I was kind of this is really good. It's a lot better, but still, it doesn't get that original emotion that it did in the beginning, which it did with Part 2. So because of that, I wanted to kind of, I wanted to make it a two-part series, and just have Part 1 and Part 2. Which might be kind of confusing to you, because this was before even Moonlight, even before Part 1. So it was just Part 2 and Part 3, which were called Part 1 and Part 2 to begin with. So then I was it's going to be two songs, The Night Sky and The Journey, and Night Sky then would have been Part 1, and The Journey would have been Part 2. But those have been renamed to make it a trilogy. So at this point, I was starting to really enjoy the song and what it's becoming. So with Part 2, I actually went back into it once I was feeling that it was kind of missing that emotion, that original emotion I was feeling. I went back and I mixed it better, and I made it a little bit more interesting musically wise, but pretty much it sounds the exact same as I first wrote it when I was 12 years old, is Dark Nights Part 2, The Night Sky. I just mixed it better just so it fits in everything else and doesn't sound completely lame. And then with Dark Nights Part 3, I was still working on mixing that, because it took me a really long time to mix that song, because I really had this vision for it, and as kind of being a perfectionist, that kind of is really hard to complete stuff. So I was just oh, I have to mix this really well, this has to be the best mix I've ever done, and I ended up putting a lot of pressure on myself, and that was kind of hard to work on music knowing that this has to sound good, and I was kind of getting a little stressed about that, and working on it a lot. But then as time went on, I was kind of the mix is getting better, and then like my vision kind of blurred for it, because when I first started off, when I was 12 years old, with Dark Nights, I was just kind of like just getting my emotion of the night and not really seeing like the end goal and being like it has to be like this. More like I just want to write like what I'm feeling. So then I kind of went back to that, and then I ended up mixing it really quickly after that, and I was just like, yeah, this sounds good. So then after that, I continued to write the rest of Dark Nights, as in like Apocalypse, Solitude, Rage Spell, and Red Tiger. I was just writing those at the same time as well. And then after I did all that, I had 6 songs done. I'm like, this EP is done. And then like I was going over all the mixes for them, make sure like everything's mixed and mastered really well, and the music all sounds good. And then after I was doing all of that, it was like just a couple weeks before, like I sent it off to get visualized by my friend Nathan, to get all like the visuals for YouTube and stuff. It was like a week before, I was like, Dark Knight should be a trilogy. And I just remember thinking that. It was like 11 o'clock at night or something, and I was just like, I can't go to bed unless it's a trilogy. Like it was weird. So then because of that, like I just like got up and just like started working on it. It was like almost midnight too when I was done. But I made Dark Knights Part 1 then, and then I renamed everyone Dark Knights Part 1 to 2 to 3. So Dark Knights what was Part 2 was now Part 3, and I renamed it The Journey for Part 3, Night Sky for Part 2, and Moonlight for Part 1. And Part 1 is actually what I did last, as you can conclude, and pretty much it's just like a little short version of Part 2. And the reason why I wanted to do that is kind of like, because A, I wanted to make it a trilogy after all, not just like 2 songs. And B, because it kind of like sets the stage, I guess, for like Dark Nights, the whole thing. It also gets like another mix I was kind of thinking about, because with Dark Nights, like a lot of it was just like me kind of thinking about the mix, because I wrote most of it like when I was 12. So I was just like, yeah, it sounds really good, like I didn't want to change like the original music of it. So that's why I kind of felt like my freedom for changing it to be like now would be the mix. So that's why I was kind of like worrying about the mix a lot, and that's another reason why it's a trilogy. It's because each song actually has a different style of mix. Like if you listen to it all again right now, you might notice that each song has a little different mix, different drum samples. So yeah, it's pretty much, that's kind of how that came about, and that's why it's a trilogy too. So yeah, let's see if there's any more details that I've forgotten. The first time I wrote Dark Nights Part 3 after remixing Part 2, it actually had the destruction theme for the verse. And what I mean by that is, this is kind of in a reference to Apocalypse, where the lead drop, so there's the drop in Apocalypse, the lead that's going on there is what I call the destruction theme, which kind of like just shows like destruction, and anytime destruction comes up in another song, I will play that same lead for the song. The same thing as in Dark Nights Part 1. The main lead over that is like the moon theme, and that plays over all the songs in Dark Nights Part 3 and 2 and 1. And basically that just shows that like the moon's coming out in the story for that time. So why there was the destruction theme in Dark Nights Part 3 was because when I was first picturing it, I was kind of like, Dark Nights Part 1 and 2 are kind of going to be like the calm ones, and Part 3 is going to be like the like massive, filthy destruction one. So I put in the destruction theme there. That's actually where I wrote the lead for Apocalypse, was in Dark Nights Part 3. And then, like, I wrote it there, I'm like, this is really good. It sets the song apart from the other two, kind of makes it like, the 1 and 2 are kind of like from my past when I was like 12, and then Dark Nights Part 3 would be like from my present right here. So to me, that was kind of like separating them out. So that night, like, I was just like, this sounds good, and I went to bed going like, it's probably done. Like, other than the mix, it's done. And then I woke up and listened to it, and I'm like, this sucks. Like, this doesn't work here. So then I felt kind of like it was kind of weird to have, like it felt like it was taken away from me almost, because I'm like I put all that work on it, and I thought what was really good, and then I'm like, now it's bad. Like, is this other stuff bad? So, like, I checked over, like, every song from the EP, and I'm like, no, they're all still good. It's just that. So, like, that really helped me, like, rest a lot, because thinking that, like, something's not good enough is, like, a really real feeling for me sometimes. Sometimes you just have to like let that go, and sometimes it's pretty hard, but it can still be done. So because the destruction theme was in there, I ended up taking that out, and I put back in the moon theme, and I was like, yeah, this fits a lot better. It really like ties it back into the rest of the other 2 songs to make it a full trilogy. And then from there I was like, that's really good. And then I'm like, okay, I have a solid EP here. Dark Nights Part 2, Dark Nights Part 1, and Solitude, Rage Spell, and Red Tiger. It was originally going to be a 5-song EP with those two. And then before I made the Dark Nights Part 1, I made Apocalypse. And the reason why I even made Apocalypse was because, so going back, this is going to end up being a long video. So going back, when I was making Apocalypse, it was pretty much like the day Wreckage released, June 17th, 2016. I was like, I'm gonna make a song called Apocalypse, and like that was it. I didn't have any ideas for it. I just knew that like that would be like a good name that I could kind of like resonate with. So then the reason I made that was because the Destruction theme, which I was calling the Destruction theme at that point, I'm like, that would fit Apocalypse. Because the thing I do when writing songs is that I normally come up with a name first, and then I just hold on to the name until I can find a lead that will match it. So like for example, that worked out with Apocalypse, and then I'm like, I put the lead in there, and I'm like, this is really good. This is gonna be a good song, and I think it's one of the best ones from Dark Nights now. So yeah, that's kind of like how Dark Nights Part 3 was changing a lot, but it all worked out. So yeah. Yeah, so going back to like why I wrote it in the first place when I was 12, was kind of like just noticing that like I like night a lot more than I do like the day. Like I would rather be in a dark room rather than a light room. It's just kind of like something that I am, is just liking the dark. And there's a condition for that. It's called Nikto Philia. It's not. Technically it's classified as a mental condition, but like it doesn't really feel that way to me. It's just kind of like a way of saying someone that likes the dark. So that's kind of why I wrote Dark Nights too, is because like I wanted to get that emotion out and like into a song that I could like kind of resonate with a lot, on a more of an intimate level. So yeah, it's kind of why I wrote it. Even as being 12, like I knew that like I didn't really know that like liking dark was like different, but like I kind of knew that like it was something that was real for me. So then I wrote it out, and yeah, that was pretty much the song there. I did most of the writing in about like a 40-minute session probably. I don't really remember it all exactly because it was like 4 years ago, but I do remember that it was a Friday night, and I do remember that it was like 10 o'clock, and I do remember that I was getting a lot of writing done. So that's pretty much how it came out. So yeah, it's kind of like why I even started writing it in the first place, and it changed a lot. So yeah, that's pretty much why Dark Nights came out. So that pretty much wraps it up, guys. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video where I've talked about this a lot, on my thoughts on Dark Nights, why it's a trilogy and all that. So stay tuned, like, subscribe to this channel, and I'll show you like how I made the songs in more of an electronic level. I do this thing called behind the scenes where I show you guys like how I make this dubstep I do and the electronic music I do. So yeah, stay tuned for some of that, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in next week's video. Until then, bye.